Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jason Maganoy. I'm the publisher of Canadian Business. And thank you for joining us at this Canadian Business Insider Fireside Chat. Today, I'm speaking with Adam Froman. He is the founder and CEO of Delvinia. He is also an award-winning entrepreneur and innovator whose vision and leadership helped build and shape Canada's digital industry. In 1998, he co-founded Delvinia, a Toronto-based company which he grew from a digital consultancy that built websites to a multi-million-dollar group of technology-enabled companies that have transformed how organizations collect, analyze, and use data to power better decision-making. Adam is the recipient of numerous innovation awards from various organizations, including Canary, Canadian New Media Awards, Market Research and Intelligence Association, Insights Association, and Stevie Awards. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
So my first question is always the same. How are you?
I would say relaxed. It's interesting that, my family has sort of three names for me. There's work dad. So that's when I come home and I'm completely engulfed in work. There's airport dad that I'm racing through. I'm like 20 steps ahead of them, trying to get them through the airport. And then there's weekend dad. And I guess over the past year, since I went through my acquisition and I left the company that acquired us last year, I've probably been more relaxed than I have in the 25 years that I spent building Delvinia. So I watched your interview with Peter Goddard, and he had told that story about the fisherman and the businessman, and talking about what he should do in terms of, he goes in the morning and fishes and then comes and spends the time with his family, and the guy tries to get him to grow a business just to end up to where he is today. And I think I'm more on the business side of it, that I've gone through it all and I'm back to where I started in terms of, being relaxed and being at home and enjoying life and figuring out what's next.
So that actually is a really great segue into my next question, which is about trajectory. So it sounds like you've had huge, bustling, busy corporate career, and now you're in that really the relaxation where you're now thinking about what's next. So tell us about the trajectory. Tell us about the trajectory of your career. And then the second part of the question is, what role did mentorship play in building it?
Along with that, I fell into a job with Deloitte's consulting group. And they had a strategy consulting group. And this was at the time of convergence, where telecom, media, and computing were all coming together. And I had such a wonderful experience being at the forefront of convergence. And after 4 years of that, what happened in Canada was we were getting job shopped around the world. And I had just gotten married and I wanted to really stay Canadian. And I'd been part of the Canadian fabric. And, it depends. They fired me, but I kind of was looking for my way out. And that stepped me into my entrepreneurial career, where I started my own firm in 98. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to take the discipline that Deloitte taught me to help people think strategically about this emerging technology called the internet, but really help them look at it from a user-centered point of view. And as you know, being in the media and being a writer, the way communications were in the early days with this internet stuff, we can control the message to people. But when you give the choice and control to the user, you can't control the message anymore. You have to engage and inspire. And I built this company, and so we started with a few partners to help companies think about it from a user-centered point of view. And I even trademarked the term, the digital customer experience. So we got into that stuff. And that was my start with the company that has become Delvinia. At the same time, I was remaining involved with Canada. The producers of digital media were across many organizations. So I started a survey of the producers of digital media. I launched the Canadian New Media Awards, which grew for 10 years, that really recognized the producers, of which eventually we emerged into the Banff Television Festival, because these were not-for-profit labors of love. But as I grew Delvinia and our consulting grew, what I realized was I really wanted to innovate. Consulting was something you helped others, but it wasn't really a scalable business. And unless you can find your own product to develop and launch and grow, you're always constantly going to be looking for your next job. So I had the benefit in the 90s to be exposed to a lot of these programs like tax credits and funding programs. I helped launch Telefilm's fund. I helped launch the Bell New Media Fund. I looked at the R&D tax credits with Shred. And I said, how can we apply those are either for the film and television industry or the technology development. But what we were focusing on was the use and application of technology in new and innovative ways. And I found a way to access those programs. So very early on in our company, I would make $1 of profit. I'd invest it back in the company, get $2 of government funding, and I had $3 to do R&D. And we did many years of R&D to help, as we consulted, to really kind of figure out what we wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to have a spinoff like our Asking Canadians online survey panel, which was a panel of people willing to do surveys online. And we grew that into the largest online survey business in Canada. And then while we were looking for that next shiny object, we saw automation happening. So since we were so entrenched in the research world, we built Methodify, which was a research automation technology. So instead of taking a business and a survey and a research project and taking 6 weeks to do, we could do the whole project in 48 hours with a report. And then, as of course, we went through the pandemic, and that was culturally damaging for me after 20 some years of building what I thought was a culture where people could be themselves. We spend so much time in companies. How do you encourage people to be themselves? How do you embrace this incredible diversity that we have, particularly in Toronto, to build a global business that can service anywhere around the world? And all of a sudden, overnight, we went remote and everyone lost their loyalty to the company. But at the same time, the digital world took off. So we had our businesses take off. And when we went to look to raise capital for my Methodify business, we had an opportunity to be acquired and our operating businesses be acquired. So I sold Asking Canadians and Methodify to a company that I'm now partially an equity holder in. And we saw the realization of what we had built. Mentorship along the way, to answer that question, is really interesting for me. And it's a bit of a monkey on my back. I've come across many mentors along the way that I had such huge expectations that they could invest their time in me and help me along the way. And inevitably, every single one, and we're just humans, so humans are humans, something happened in their life or their insecurities didn't allow them to do it. And I outgrew every single one of them, which really disappointed me because I wanted to find a mentor that could beat the crap out of me when I needed to be slapped in the side of the head, but could also keep me inspired when I would, be driving forward. And the greatest mentors to me in the end have been my parents. My father passed away 5 years ago. My mother is still around. They never understood ever what I did. They knew I was in computers. They never asked, but they never questioned my passion and drive to be myself and to pursue my interests. So for me, I guess for my personality, having that unconditional support, which led to then, I became married, and my wife was my second partner in terms of my moral support. Even when things went bad with us in the company, she was there saying, you can do it. So that was the sort of support I needed as opposed to mentorship. But because I was always disappointed that mentors would stop and they didn't carry through, it formed my interest to be a mentor to many others. And in some ways, my mentorship has been so strong. I see the potential of people. I push them so hard. I've probably broken a few people along the way, helping them to become their best selves. And they just didn't want to. But also I have others that have been incredibly successful, that all I ever wanted from people when I mentor is, if I can help you do what you want to achieve faster than it took me, I've succeeded.
So that's a great way to view mentorship. I feel the same way too. Like in terms of how, hopefully, how I view my mentors, but also how I mentor. I like speed is a really important consideration, helping someone get to where they should be faster. But I love that. Like it sounds like in your career, I mean, the beginning of the internet, the beginning of this concept of digital user experience, it seems like you were at the forefront of all of those things.
Depressing though, as well, right?
Yes.
Because you feel like you have to prove yourself. And no one ever wanted to listen to me, because I'm saying this internet is coming. The user experience is going to change the way you do business. And nobody wanted to listen across industries. And I had an incredible moment where I spoke at the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, their big conference. I was a keynote talking about the future. It was probably one of my worst presentations I've ever done, because it was a deadpan audience. You could see all the executives sitting back at the back going, okay, this stuff's gonna, like, when does this internet stuff end? And about 3 months later, we had the dot-com crash, where I had a company of 50 people. We went down to 12 in about 4 months. And you know that the industry was saying, see, the internet was just a fad. And it was the dot-com with no revenues. But like, I've felt my entire career that I had to prove myself and improve the importance of this digital media and how important it will be in our lives. And, suddenly when social media took off, we saw that turn. But of course, everybody became a digital consultant, and nobody cared that I was preaching it from the early 90s. So, you go from one end to the other. But that chip on my shoulder, I think, was a huge part of making me so driven to help people realize how important this would be in our lives.
Well, I mean, going back to that, like, I think that you find that that's like a cyclical nature of business, though. It's like there's always gonna be someone doing a keynote, and everyone is like, AI or social media or mobile. Because there was this bit about like there's this internet, it's like an internet museum where it screen caps pages of the internet like in the 90s. And like, yeah, like if I was the CEO of like the largest newspaper in North America and I saw what CNN looked like in 1992 or whatever, I'd be like, I'm not too worried about that. That's not gonna do anything to my business. So like, and there's like it sounds like there's like a big part of grit here. Like you're an entrepreneur. It sounds like you had the support to help you get through these. Like you need grit to sort of keep going. But like, how do you sort of continue when you're just surrounded by naysayers saying, "Hey, listen, the internet's not a thing," and that's a big belief to be battling against. Like, how did you know you were going to come through this at the end?
I guess because back in the early 90s, when it all came together and I saw the digital media emerge, I it became my passion. And I just couldn't stop. I became consumed in it. I was so passionate. I had no idea what it would mean in terms of being successful to me, but I knew I had to be a part of this. And I
Mm.
think, I reflect now, those days when I had no money, when I was just trying to figure out what my career was, I was stumbling along. It was the best time of my career. I had zero pressure. As you build a company and as you're consulting, and then, you have employees, the pressure, and then you have a family that you have to provide for, the pressure of life catches up to you. And there was, so I never lost that passion. The other side was, having been through the dot-com boom, and when we launched our firm, it couldn't have been better. It was 1998. Everyone was built. What a website might cost $4,000 to build today was $1 million back then. We would go
Well,
into companies and say, we can help you with this digital experience. They go, well, here's $1 million to build our website. And I would say, but you have to do it from a user-centered point of view. And they'll go, do you want the job or not? So people didn't care. They were just jumping on board to do it. And we got exposed to some incredible things to reflect on. When Royal Bank launched internet online banking back in 1999, they needed
wow.
help with the digital side of what they were doing in launch of their campaign. And we were able to bring not only the digital campaign, but we linked everything back. So when they clicked through, because it was for online banking, we gave them the tracking of the performance of the campaign. And it actually showed that direct mail was the best pull. And they go, well, you guys are the digital guys. Why are you telling direct mail is? Because that's what the data said. And so I knew that this stuff was important. And then when the dot-com crash happened, and you go from being passionate, growing a business, having no clue really what you're doing, not understanding what taking debt from bank mean if you don't have the revenues. When that crashed and we had to put money in, and we got thrown into special loans at the bank, and we had to decide, did we want to pursue this? It really tested your fabric of who you are as a person. And at the time, I had partners that, like, we all put some money back in, but they got tired after the year. And I knew that I wanted to keep this going because I had some R&D funding, and one was to help launch online voting in a municipal election in Markham, and the other was, how will broadband technology affect market research? These are really innovative studies that I had funding to allow us to get through this, at the time, a bit of a recession, to do. So I always pursued my passion and didn't let it go. And then in 2008, 2009, when we had the subprime mortgage crisis and the recession, then I really looked over the cliff. We were about 60 people. Our revenues had stopped, and I had to decide, am I going to mortgage my home and keep the business going without clearly knowing where it's going to lead to? And when I got myself through that, and we got through those tough times, and we saw growth again, I had no fear. So I knew I could go into any situation and I could survive and eventually, hopefully, thrive. And when we had our acquisition, it was the first time where I actually said, when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to grow a business, you're frequently feeling like standing at the threshold of the door and never getting through, or, being the bridesmaid or never the bride. And you're always one step forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. And sometimes it seems very futile, but if you have the passion of what you believe in, and you keep some very sound business principles like cash flow and profitability, the experience of building a business is way more special than simply trying to achieve an exit. So when I had my exit, it wasn't necessarily by choice, it was more opportunity. I really, I laughed a lot because I have this 30-year career of building the industry in Canada, of building a successful company, that I go into every room, every meeting, and they go, Delvinia? Who's Delvinia? And I could explain the body of work, so much that my business partners bought me a t-shirt for conferences, don't you know who I am? And, and then eventually what happened was everyone knew me for my exit, which is really bizarre. So I've been building on that concept, and I've really taken the past year to reflect on my work that I've done isn't simply the exit that I achieved, which everyone focuses on, the financial success. It's really about the journey that I've been on, and how do we not only help companies and entrepreneurs like myself who didn't take external capital until I wanted to grow. I wanted that control of being a revenue-driven business. How do you help others think like that and get through the tough times and believe in themselves? And the other part is, how do we create long-term economic prosperity in Canada? Because I'm really nervous about Canada's long-term economic prosperity. I see a path. I've been involved at the highest level of policymaking, and we really need some leadership and vision to achieve that. And if I can be a part of helping achieve that for Canada, it's bigger than me. It's about my children and their children, et cetera.
Well, I mean, so in your work, you indicate that, fiscally and socially conservative policies are critical to a strong business ecosystem. So what do you mean by conservative?
Well, it's not the political term of conservative. When I think about conservative, Canada, I'm sure you see it all the time. We're getting beat up around innovation now. We saw the government shelve this innovation department to help to help Canadians grow. We saw how, over the past few years, the government really funded foreign companies come set up in Canada with no investment on their part to just simply create jobs. But we saw, and your industry got hammered by seen the revenue simply leave Canada and intellectual property leave Canada. So what I look at, along this line is conservative is about fiscal responsibility. So when my company got in trouble the first time, I built a cash flow that managed how are we going to get through this on a cash flow basis. When our company took off, I pulled out that cash flow again because it scared me. How am I going to make sure that we don't get ourselves in a position? And the cash flow model that I built with the help of my accountants, I could look 6 months in advance and know where my cash position would be. And then I would update it. That allowed me to sleep at night because entrepreneurs don't sleep very well. And you have to find ways that'll let you get through the night. And that was it. So the fiscal conservatism is really about thinking about cash flow, thinking about profitability when you're looking for investment. So I lived through the dot-com boom. I don't know if you remember that pets.com commercial where it's a video, it's on YouTube, where it's like the guy's walking through like a Western ghost town, and you're seeing all the dot-com carnage of companies that fell off and it was really fascinating. And that's what happened. All these companies were raising capital with no real long-term business model or profitability. And we saw over the past, right before the pandemic, a lot of money being raised and a lot of multiples based on revenue, and without knowing whether the company would go from doing 8 million a year to 100 million, which they were supposed to. But at 8 million, they were valued at $80 million. So how do you get your money out? The fundamentals weren't there. So conservative in the fiscal side is really about managing the cash flow. When you're going to raise capital, having the right model for investors to invest to get a proper return. On the social side, that's a little more problematic. Canada, one of the special things about Canada is if you don't believe in social policy, you shouldn't believe in Canada. We have to, none of us who make larger incomes like paying 50+% tax rate. But it's important to have these programs that support everybody in Canada. What I feel that we've lost a bit in terms of, particularly in the technology side, the focus on just creating middle-class jobs without creating wealth in Canada. Government can only fund so much of these social programs, and it relies on the community and the rest of the country to be philanthropic and give back. If we're not allowing wealth to be created and our profitability to remain in Canada, how do we fund the social programs that are going to allow Canada to be a destination for people to feel safe, to leave other countries that they may be, persecuted, and grow and contribute to what I will always rant about, the long-term economic prosperity to Canada? So the social conservatism is really about not being afraid of making decisions that everyone has to be accountable for where Canada is going. And it's not just saying you have to help this group, you have to help this group, and creating more debt without any way out of it. So it's not a conservative platform politically. It's really just a entrepreneur's interest to, what I've been able to do over the past 25 years, nobody gave to me. I felt like a minority preaching digital. I was, the banks are not there to help fund your growth. They're there to finance your cash flow. And when you have intellectual property that isn't a building, how do you get growth investment and get a valuation that's proper? I went through that, and I've been able to come through the other end. And I don't want to be told this is what you have to do to help social programs. I want to create incentives for me to help Canada be stable. And that's the conservative mindset that I have.
Oh, wow. So that takes me to my next question, which is about there's just a lot. So one of the things about it sounds like an important part of this is not being distracted, like being really, really focused on your core business, being great at your core business, and really understanding sort of the fundamentals of your business. But there's a lot going on in the world right now. Like there was the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, that happened. It's happening. The war in Ukraine, Israel's war in Gaza. And it seems like brands and businesses are often looked at to express like beliefs, like express beliefs in a way, or at least express the beliefs of their customers, their team, etc. Sometimes a business will leave an entire market in response to something that's happening in the world. Do you think this is a good business strategy?
No, I think we need
Okay.
I think we need companies to have a moral compass today and accept responsibility for not being able to speak out of what's right and wrong. Um, I think that people, in a democracy, everyone should have their opportunity to voice what they want, um, but no one should ever feel intimidated or marginalized. And what I find now is, and social media is a bit of this problem. So it's created an environment where what I call this 80-20 rule, where 80% of people who are, supportive, they're not biased, they don't have they're not prejudiced, they don't have hate, are not posting on social media. They're not, my wife is a perfect example of that. She's a lurker. She's not a poster, right? She spends hours. I probably spend more time watching reels than her,
Yeah.
but she's, what she consumes a lot of content on social media, but she doesn't participate and post. You get this 20% of polarized groups that have an agenda to disrupt, to challenge, which not challenge in a healthy way, to challenge at the expense of somebody else. They're the 80% that are posting content, and it creates a dynamic for society today that's very confusing and very it creates a lot of anxiety. And I think companies need to take a moral compass and choose whether, not just about their profitability or pulling out of a market, and that it's really a case of having voice, of creating dialogue and respect and safety for everyone. Right now, there's one of the most beautiful things that we have in Canada is this cultural diversity and the welcoming and openness. But what's been going on, there is fear going on. People are being polarized, which creates, people being afraid in Canada of what could happen to them. And then we should never have that in Canada. And I think companies need to take a position and really it can't just be left to individuals. And especially, like I said, social media doesn't help because it gives the freedom to those who are willing to be most active to share.
I mean, my my next question then is, because like you've been through, like you've had a long career, and you've been at like you've named the dot-com bubble. You named the mortgage, the financial crisis in 2008. There's the pandemic. Um, so can you share example, and you have a very simple business philosophy. So can you share examples of your journey when you're encountering just these kind of big macro events, and how your adherence to the fiscally and socially conservative principles has led to really good outcomes for your business? Obviously, you're still here. You've exited all these great things, but like, if who knows what's coming up next? Who knows what big macro event is coming up next? What are three things that business owners, entrepreneurs should go, you know what? The macro is the macro, but here are three things that you absolutely should do to maintain growth, maintain resilience in your business.
So I'll give you three examples of instances that really will elaborate on that. The first being the dot-com one. And what that taught me cash flow management. And if a company and an individual does not look at their business from a cash flow discipline, they will not survive. And anyone in a senior responsibility, whether you're good at numbers or not, I happen to enjoy, like, my obsession with my controller was updating the cash flow because it allowed me for peace of mind. So people don't realize that when you're going through and being an entrepreneur, mental state is a huge part. We all suffer from depression. We've all struggled with our own identity and how to be inspired when things aren't going well, and how to sustain. That's what really separates those entrepreneurs from those who shouldn't be are when it really trouble becomes overwhelming. Are you going to be that person who takes the rope on your shoulder and pulls everyone over the hill to get past the crest? Or are you going to blame everyone else why you haven't gotten there? And I've always been that person that I never wanted to let the people around me down, whether it was my employees or my family. I never looked at anyone was going to do it for me. So the best way I was able to do that was financial stability. When we faced our crisis with 30 days of income left, of cash for our payroll, instead of laying people off, I cut everybody's salary by 25% for 1 quarter. And we ended up putting $1 million back in the business. I mortgaged my home as high as I could, and I put money, my business partner put money in, and we forged ahead. After that quarter, I reinstated everyone's salaries, and I got to see what people really were like. People resented me for cutting their salaries. So at that moment, I said to myself, I will not put my employees first at the expense of the business. So my first and foremost is I need to make the business healthy. If I make the business healthy, I can take care of everybody else. So that was a huge epiphany for me that I had, because I love supporting people. I want to see them be their best selves. I'm kind of like John Malkovich in Mice and Men, when he's holding that little mouse and loving it so much, but he ends up squishing it and killing it. Like I get so passionate about helping people that sometimes I overstep, but my intentions are good. But I knew I had to take care of myself and the company first. And then anyone who was if you didn't want to be a part of that journey, I can't help you. The last one was the pandemic. And I still vividly remember I was moving my daughter out of residence at Queen's, and I got a call from a friend saying, Trudeau's going to close the airports on Monday because of this COVID pandemic. So I got my executive team on the phone while I was still in Kingston, and I said, we need to meet and we need to make a decision. So that weekend, we basically got the team on board, got all the managers on board, called a meeting for Monday. And one of the things we had done as a company in preparation, because we handled so much data, was we became certified with this organization called ISO, the International Standards Organization for Data Security, so that our clients would be comfortable that we were managing data, that we had processes and protections of their data. What that did was, which you never thought you'd have to use, was what happens in an event that that you have to deal with. Suddenly, we had to deal with this. We went into a crisis mode, and we said, we are going remote as of tomorrow. It was so smooth, our transition, that we got everybody working remote, that we got everything working. Our clients didn't miss a beat, and everyone, was at home safe. And that was important for me. I was sending emails every day to make people feel safe. And we really invested in helping people along. When the business started taking off again, so the world went digital overnight, suddenly our survey business and our research technology business took off, but people were struggling personally because of the pandemic. And we wanted to be there to support them. And we had to look forward to it. So we had to say, you know what, hopefully this was subside by the fall and people would move back in the office. The minute we even talked about it, there was a mutiny aboard. People were working from home, and because our industry was growing, they were getting calls with jobs with $10,000, $20,000 more, doing the same job, never leaving their house. And what I experienced there was, after 25 years of building a business, and it was all about my passion for building the business I wanted to have was built on authenticity and trust. I wanted everyone to just be comfortable who they were. And I wanted to build trust, which is very hard in a corporate sense, to build trust amongst management and each other. That all went away. Overnight, we lost the essence of what our culture was as a company, there was no loyalty left to the company except for a very small few people. And while we doubled in size, so we grew by 100%, we had 50% turnover at the same time. So I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. I see companies, I've been on both sides now in terms of being management and then watching management have to deal with it. The mandates of calling people to come back to the office, the resistance of people to want to go to an office. And I look at that and I said, you know what? Cultures of companies have to come back before you really are able to do it. So is it a chicken and an egg? Do you need to get people back in the office to then build the culture again? Or can you build a culture that will create an incentive that people, not being in the office full time, but people want to work together? We've shown that you can work remotely and be productive, but you can't build a culture in a remote world. And that was the third example of, and I think that broke me more than all the others, where, the loss of this incredible culture of a company we had developed. So when we did have our acquisition opportunity, as sad as I was to sell what we had built, it was actually, I was very ready for it because I felt like the culture wasn't the same culture as it had been.
So speaking of culture, it sounds like, businesses are increasingly moving into things like corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, inclusion training. It's the hot thing in the corporate world. Um, you still want to maintain hybrid work culture. So it's like lots of DEI, lots of corporate social responsibility, lots of top down onto culture, lots of hybrid, back to work, not back to work, employees first, etc. Are you a fan of this approach? Do you think this is going to be is a really good way to build culture for an organization moving forward?
I think that we were very early on at embracing social responsibility and what it is today, DE&I, in the sense that I don't think people really feel, and this is why I think Canada has such a potential to be one of the world-class countries to grow a business and build our economy, and especially Toronto being this cultural diversity. I built a company from the start, an extremely culturally diverse organization, that it didn't matter your gender, it didn't matter your sexual orientation, it didn't matter your race or religion. What mattered was building trust, being authentic, and helping to be part of, being accountable when you were given responsibility. And accountability is a huge part. And I think what's happened is in the corporate world, the effort to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, to ensure that you're giving back for social responsibility and corporate responsibility of giving back, it's become a corporate process rather than an authentic desire. And because it was so embedded in our culture, I never really thought much about it. If you could respect everyone, you didn't have any issues of your cultural diversity, because it just was. We had the diversity in our management team was incredible. The people, I had a lot of women who were in leading roles that were paid very well. I would have, I would celebrate everyone's differences. And, while we were trying, I would do things like, especially during COVID, when we were trying to keep everyone together in the culture, we would have Black History Month. I would have one of my employees talk about his personal story of his heritage. When we had someone who was from her grandmother was part of the residential school system and got adopted by a family and had to give up her Métis status. And she's fighting for her Métis status now. She's never told anyone. And then we brought her in to share her story with the entire company. I think building empathy amongst everyone and to share their differences and be accepting is more important than imposing policies or initiatives that make the company look good. Because if you do it from the inside out and build that trust and authenticity and allow people to be accepting, inherently the company will be recognized for achieving it. But trying from a top down of just imposing it, I think you're doing a disservice. You're giving voice to some that may, based on who they are, and then you're supporting causes that may not be from the hearts of all your employees.
Yeah, it sounds like authenticity is an important part of just a through line of our conversation for you, which is great. But my next question is, so you've been an entrepreneur, Canadian, proudly Canadian entrepreneur. We're entering a very interesting moment in our. We're gonna have an election. We're gonna have an election probably in a year. Very, very different philosophies in terms of how to make Canada better for business. Um, my question is two-pronged. Is it easy to be an entrepreneur in Canada? Number one. And then the second part of the question is, what should government do to create the absolute best environment for entrepreneurs in this country?
So is it easy to be an entrepreneur? In hindsight, sure. Is it easy to go through the entrepreneurial journey without proper support and passion? No, but if you have it, I encourage it. You're on this life path one way. At the end of the day, what I've realized would differentiate those that should be entrepreneurs or not, when things are really tough, are you willing to carry it over the hump and get not only yourself, but your company and everyone attached who are believing in you cross that finish line? That's the important thing. That's what I think is the difference of a personality. And it's different, like different people need different supports to do it, but you have to be accountable and be willing to own that. So I think if you have that, I think everyone try and fail. You will not succeed right away, but failure is only when you actually give up. And I think if you look at everything as a learning experience, you look at your journey, you accept that you're going to have to make sacrifices. You have to accept that you are going to be damaged emotionally for the long term, and you need time to heal and find ways to heal after your entrepreneurial journey. It will be, and even within that, there's two types of entrepreneurs. There's the entrepreneur who wants to build a lifestyle business, that wants to have a certain lifestyle, but they want to be their own boss. Then there's the entrepreneur who wants to build something. That's the more challenging. So the first one, you could build a lifestyle business, easy, keep your overhead low. That's your one message. The other side is you have to figure out how you're going to get through adversity and find your focus of what success means for you to build a sustainable and profitable business. So those are two. The second question, what could the government do? Now, I'm a recipient, so I have a very unique experience in Canada. I was able to spend 25 years building some incredibly profitable businesses that were growing globally as a Canadian company. And it wasn't until I reached a point that we were growing so fast that I any outside investment and give up my absolute control over my business. And the only way I was able to do that were these programs that we have in Canada, that if you have some profit, our government has created incredible policies and programs that will allow you to reinvest in yourself and grow and be innovative. And I have benefited for 25 years for my passion and my support. And then over the last 8 years, in terms of helping us to bridge and scale further. We're in a very fragile time of our economy, of political disruption, what's going on out there. What I fear is that can the government focus on what is truly important for the long-term economic prosperity of Canada? And what that is helping Canadian entrepreneurs who want to grow in Canada, who have built successful businesses, but need to have the opportunity to scale globally from Canada. Are the policies there that are going to help them achieve that and not just get to a point that they have to sell, inevitably, usually sell to a foreign buyer. So can we overcome that gap? And I think the next one, the other important point about that is, while we're trying to focus on helping create jobs in Canada, we live in a global world. Jobs, a Canadian job, you can be a great Canadian company with a lot of remote workers now that all over the world. And so if you're going to create a company, it's not just about the jobs anymore. And I suppose there is another really important third point, which is protecting the intellectual property that we have in Canada and keeping it Canadian and investing in Canada, because my involvement with an organization called the Council of Canadian Innovators, led by John Ruffalo and Jim Balsillie. And while I built this good company, I spent many hours with Jim understanding. I understood intellectual property, but I didn't fully understand why it is so important. And he did help me understand, if we can create intellectual property in Canada and keep it in Canada, and then turn it into a global standard, that will bring revenues back into Canada without having to work at it. And that will have a huge contribution to our long-term economic prosperity. So those would be the things that I think our government really needs to focus on. My fears will be the Liberal government over the past 10, 15 years had a real focus on attracting foreign investment, foreign companies to come into Canada at the expense of companies like mine. And then the other side of the innovation agenda was all about startups and incubators. So the scale-up companies, and to me, a scale-up is a company that is doing at least $10 million of revenue. That has the potential to reach 100 million globally. They might have maxed out what they can do in Canada, or they truly have a global audience anyways. How do we help them, support them, and what are the policies to support them when our banking system is an asset-based lending system, and our government has really been focused on large foreign companies or startups, and we sort of fit in the gap there. And that's what I hope that, we can sort of focus on and keep us growing so that we can see continued wealth creation and growth.
I mean, that is a great way to view it. Like that whole thing about like, oh, I hope it's versus like, I hope that we have really great businesses that can scale. We keep our inventions in Canada, that kind of a lens versus I hope Amazon builds an office in Vancouver or whatnot, right? So obviously, that sort of protect like helping companies scale, getting our inventions out there, getting our talent out there. That should be a huge part of how the government invests in the economy in Canada. But my question, my second to last question is, it sounds like you're moving. Going back to the mentorship piece, it looks like you're moving into more of a mentor role. Some of the advice you've been giving today is just really, really simple, really sound, really simple. So for the CEOs and the business leaders who are going to be watching this, three things. Like, what do you think that they need to do to get themselves ready to, regardless of the environment, get themselves ready for growth and for resilience?
So I don't think you get yourself ready for growth. I think you choose to pursue growth. And if you're in technology, you have no choice but to grow or you die, because technology is a moving thing. So you cannot it's not like building a widget and everyone wants to buy that widget and hopefully you make changes to the widget. Technology gets displaced. Nothing is cast in stone. So you have to continue to innovate. Canada, and maybe this isn't a popular statement within a lot of the media or many of the organizations that are lobbying the government, Canada is an amazing place to innovate. You just have to have the stomach to navigate the programs to access to do it. I'm a testament to it. There's a big review on the R&D tax credits and how much money is being spent on consultants. I really don't want to be a consultant. I could start up a consultancy to help people access all these government programs. I think it's very important for CEOs to learn how to do it themselves and bring that capability inside their companies and invest in it. So I'm very optimistic that Canada can actually prosper around innovation. I think with all the instability around the world, if we don't sit back and worry about what's going on in the world or don't fight ourselves internally, Canada could use this instability in the world to emerge as a global leader of innovation. And we just have to be focused and desire. So a CEO who is in Canada that wants to grow, that is experiencing growth, and they're doing what I say is maintaining their profitability, which is really important. How do they grow, and is there opportunities to grow? There's probably no better time than now to do it, because the economy is probably at the lowest it's going to be in a while. Hopefully it doesn't go any further down. So we're at the valley floor. If you can put the time into leveraging and maintaining your investment and reinvesting in your innovation, focusing on leveraging all the tools available, whether it's the government using your own capital to get further financing without having to be diluted yet. Because as an aside, the biggest challenge, and I went through it, is that when you go to the banks for some debt financing to grow, many of them will say, well, this is an equity deal. But if you give up equity too early and you believe that you're going to experience the growth over the next 6 to 12 months, why would you give up equity now? Why don't you wait till you grow to that next level? Your valuation goes up and you get the same amount of money at a less diluted value. So I think that focus and that desire to leverage what we have today and the tools we have today and the banking system we have today to stay focused, to position a company to grow. And then as the economy takes off, you have your foot on the gas. So now is the time to reinvest in yourself. And there are a lot of programs that are available from the government that you could use that will take, if you take $1 of your own money, to get $2 to $3 of the government funding to help you hedge how far you'll get down the road with your investment. And I think that I see it as a huge opportunity right now. But at the same time, all these noises and factors and instability becomes overwhelming. And I guess, as we talked before, this is the test for the entrepreneur. Can they elevate themselves through all the noise and see the future?
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Just invest in yourself, invest in your business, invest in your future. And it's a really great piece of advice. So my last question, what is next for you in 2024?
Spent the last year rebuilding my golf swing and perfecting how to smoke ribs. So it's time to figure out what I want to do next with Delvinia. Actually, I used it as a year of healing. I think because of the pandemic and what it did, we talked about my culture and going through the acquisition process. It was really nice to have a year to reflect and step back. I'm going to be focused on continuing to invest in policy research and having a voice around what the government can be doing. That's a personal passion of mine. But what I'm going to be looking for Delvinia will really be what will inspire me of the next stage of growth. I think I'm not looking for anything in particular. I'm not looking to simply jump on in an organization. I think what we have the opportunity to do is look at where the market is, what Canada needs, and where the growth opportunities are. And I'm at that privileged time where I can see what's going to inspire me and drive my passion again. I need to be passionate about what I'm growing. I need to be inspired. I see a lot of wonderful things be presented in front of me, and I'm waiting to see that one thing that I will either want to connect with, or the multiple things to help influence a lot of great entrepreneurs who have gone through similar paths that I have, and helping them kind of not only scale their businesses, but also have the interest to how do we help Canada in terms of our long-term economic prosperity. I don't want to lose this great country that we built in the sense of being an innovation economy, growing great companies. But now is the time that we have to overcome this challenge to how do we scale companies and how do we keep them Canadian?
And that's a great new mission. And it's a really great next thing for your next act, Adam. But thank you again for taking the time, and looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you, Jason. This was a lot of fun. And